All right, peace, y'all. Welcome to week 10 of the work-based learning program. We're going to be talking about roles and job descriptions. We're furthering our discussions about management and operations after talking about goal implementation and timelines last week. If you didn't get a chance to watch those videos, they, I guess hint at the presence of spirituality in what we're doing. So hope you all check that out and see what they're talking about in terms of getting your mind right. So for week 10, our intention is to support you all in understanding the value of clarity in collective work and understanding approaches to creating clear roles/job descriptions. So today we're going to talk about how roles work in sociocracy, and also the difference between roles and job descriptions, and really the organizational tree that we're used to seeing in terms of work structure. So I'm going to reshare so that my sound is together. And we'll start with the video, and then we'll move from there. This video is explaining sociocracy, or also called dynamic governance. So yeah, we'll watch this and then look at some of the materials we have for helping build our understanding.
You want to make a difference, and you want to make a difference together. Working together, getting things done, can be fun. We long for that experience. You can be effective and open in a way that respects everyone in your group. You want your group to make decisions fast, to hear everyone's voice, and to enjoy success. Sociocracy came from the Netherlands and has spread all over Europe, the US, and the world. It is an established, tried and tested governance system, ready for you to use. Some people prefer to call it dynamic governance. Let's look at how decisions are made in sociocracy. An issue will come to a working group.
So I was contacted because there was an issue with...
The group will create a full picture of what is going on. They will follow a process to come to a proposal that takes everybody into account. In sociocracy, we want all voices to be heard. One tool to do that is to talk in rounds. Rounds make it easy for people to speak, and since you know you will be heard, rounds also make it easier to listen. We want to make good decisions and have all voices and concerns get equal consideration.
Okay, I think we covered everything.
Yeah, and I think this should work for everyone too.
Decisions are made by consent. We ask, is this proposal good enough to try out? Does anyone object to the proposal? Not everyone gets their personal preference. We figure out a way to improve our proposal until it is good enough and everyone can consent to it. The whole group takes responsibility for the objections and seeks to address the underlying concerns.
So let's see if we've dealt with all objection and do a consent vote.
I consent.
No objection.
No objection.
I consent.
Consent.
No more objections.
I don't have any objections, so it looks like we have consent.
In sociocracy, we call the working groups circles. Each circle has an aim, a shared purpose. Circles make decisions about responsibilities that are in their domain. The people who actually do the work together decide together. They know best what needs to happen. They do the work. They see what works and what doesn't. Let them make the decisions. How do we make a whole from the parts? In sociocracy, we do this through linking. Every circle has a leader and a delegate. The leaders and delegates of the department-level circles together form the general circle. Information can now flow back and forth through the entire organization. The leader typically lets the circle know the overall operational plan and what needs to be done. The delegate makes sure the department circle's experience is heard in the general circle. We call this the double link. Subcircles are also double linked. That way, we get maximal transparency and efficiency throughout the whole organization. When decisions are put into practice, it is often thought as a one-way street. However, in order to get closer to our goals, we have to make sure we measure the outcome of our decisions. in order to find out if what we're doing is actually working. We can only get better if we listen to what needs improvement and what is working well.
When we decided this, we totally forgot to take into account.
The circle may decide to revise their policies and practices, or the circle might decide to extend the feedback process by involving other circles, like their mother circle or a helping circle, to get more input on how to make a decision that is within the range of tolerance of everyone who is affected. We can continually adapt to our changing world. We don't get stuck.
Everybody can have their voice in this.
And we will always work something out that everyone can consent to.
More people can participate deeply.
Our circle structure helps us to be effective
And fully transparent in our organization as a whole.
Not everything will be perfect right away.
But if we keep experimenting, our organization as a whole will get better all the time.
If you're inspired to introduce sociocracy in your organization,
All right, cool. So as always, y'all are welcome to unmute to ask questions or put questions in the chat. This is generally how sociocracy or dynamic governance is slated to work. And the reason why I'm introducing you all to this is because this is the form of like democratic management that I'm most familiar with. Excuse me. At Sustainable Economies Law Center, we use a version of dynamic governance that's been adapted for our use. And so at the Law Center, we have a general circle, and we also have working circles as well as sub-circles underneath of those. And so, yeah, today I'll be, kind of walking you through how that works the way we do it. And if it's something that is resonant for you, yeah, I hope you can pick it up and use it, and feel free to ask questions if you want support with implementation. So in dynamic governance and democratic organizations generally, there are many centers of power. We're not necessarily trying to centralize all power in one spot, but we're trying to build power for everyone and let them take it up as they choose. So I think a lot of us are used to this kind of structure in organizations where there's someone at the top who has a bunch of power, and then everyone else is kind of working alongside or working to do what that head person says. And there's there's this a very apparent hierarchy that may be good, may not be good. It's really dependent on the organization. And not all hierarchy is bad. It is good to plot out where decisions are made, where locuses of power are, etc. So I'm going to go to the next slide where we're seeing an example of this, what's called the Awesome Youth Restaurant. And I'll walk through this, show how this kind of tree-like organizational structure could be transformed into a circle. So you see there's the board of directors at the top, followed by the executive director, and then there's directors underneath of them who are leading different departments. If we think of the pink dots as symbolizing a job, each of those dots would have a job description. And so, the executive director may have a job description about raising money, helping to set the strategy, stuff like that. The server would probably have a job description of being friendly, being fast and efficient while serving the food. But if we don't necessarily want a bunch of power over in our organization, and we want to decentralize power, then we can start considering this shift into the circle structure. There's a lady named Eleanor Ostrom who won the Nobel Prize in Economics for analyzing like the management of a common pool of resources. She came up with 8 like principles or things that we need to keep in account. I always like to share this because I think these do make sense. The first is clearly defined boundaries, and that's over like the roles, the job descriptions, if you choose that. Just like introducing some amount of clarity for, you know, what each position is doing, what decisions they can make, or like who they need to check in with, what body. That gets into the rules regarding like how we adapt to local conditions, like who gets to make those kinds of strategy choices. Like number 3, like how do we have a democratic participatory decision-making process, and like how is that generative? We like it's very important to hold each other co-accountable. Part of being clear is like saying like what happens if someone is exploitative of whatever resources, like our time, our money, etc. Like how do we, I don't know, punish or call people in depending on where your organization is standing on that. You like it's very important for all democratic organizations to have conflict resolution methods and to figure out how to create early intervention points so that if something is starting to get off the rails, it can be fixed, and not being afraid to call in outside support. Yeah. As we're going like through this, figuring out like who's holding what tasks and responsibilities, how are we dealing with each other as we're doing the work, we want to be conscious that there's this theory called the tyranny of structurelessness, and it can be found in, you know, some collective spaces where there's not a clear leader or a clear process for making decisions, and so often the loudest person in the room is the one who will like take over the meeting and direct where things are going, even though it may not be in the best interest of the group. And so finally getting back into like the circle structure, we're creating ultimately many centers of power where we can spread work among semi-autonomous circles. It's important to understand that individuals can be in multiple circles. And so as you're creating your process, and as you're a small organization, it's gonna be likely that, you know, everyone is in many different circles, maybe the same circles at the same time. And it's up to you all to map out like how that can work for you right now, and then how, like when you get to the ultimate spot that y'all want to be, like let's say you're 3 people now, but you want to be 10. So like mapping out how your process works for 3 people and how it will ultimately work for 10 people, at least on a, you know, outline-ish type scale, would be very helpful. And so I'm gonna bring us back to this org tree, so we can see what it looked like before, with the board of directors, and then the different directors on top of everyone else. When we switch that into a semi-autonomous circle, we're seeing that there is a board of directors, which is sort of inside of this circle, but not quite, because the board of directors isn't always composed of everyone who's working there. You know, it could be outside folks as well. And we can see that there are roles or job titles within each of these circles, and there can be many different job titles or roles within these circles. And so like we're seeing there's a serving role within the restaurant circle, a content role within the admin circle, or within the training circles, excuse me, and then a conflict engagement role within the admin circle, as well as staff member in the general circle. There is more than likely more. There's probably in the restaurant circle, like, you know, a cook role or a decorator role, or a role to order produce, etc. So, you know, as you dive into these, you'll find many different roles. And how these things work is you're gonna definitely state the purpose of what that role is gonna be doing. And so here we're seeing the server role has a purpose of providing customer service to guests while they are at their tables. Very simple, letting folks know, like, this is what we're expecting of this. It's good to have it clear and simple and not like paragraphs so folks can remember that particular purpose. The responsibilities, they're going to be, those are the different tasks recurring that this role is going to be engaging in. So establishing a welcoming environment, taking orders, relaying them to the kitchen, responding to guest requests, are the top 3 that are here. There may be more, that may be it. It depends on how detailed y'all want to get inside of your governance process. I do want to say that when you are, well, governance and management process, but when you are like mapping this stuff out, more detail is helpful, but too much detail can be like bogging your organization down. And I don't know, think of it as sort of like the United States. Or we can even like scale down the scope to California. I don't think any of us know all of the laws that are on the books in California. There's just like so many of them, right? Like we may pick and choose and like, be aware of certain laws, but there's no way we can know all of those. And I would say that you don't want to create that much inside of your organization either. Like you want to be conscious of the like, I guess, where your members' mindsets are and what's needed to get you all on the same page now without being too burdensome or bureaucratic. So looking at another role, we're seeing that the conflict engagement steward, they have a purpose of helping staff communicate effectively in challenging moments and creating an environment where we can learn and grow from conflicts and disagreements. That's pretty clear purpose. And then they've got some responsibilities of administering conflict engagement process, responding to requests. I'm planning 1 workshop per year. And so, like if and when you are like mapping out this management process around like the work you want to do, or the work that you're already doing in most cases, this is how it could look like as it's like getting scaled out. Now you're seeing 2 people on here. And so they're both staff members, Samuel and Sophia. Samuel is handling some of the like the purchasing and the cooking, where Sophia is doing the serving. And yeah, you can see how like, they have a different amount of roles in the different circles. They're not in each circle, but they are helping the organization as a whole move forward and complete its mission. Another thing that we want to think about is that we're not necessarily, well, these roles are dynamic. I'll talk about that first. And so these roles can shift. And so just because like Sophia is the server this year and Sam is the cook this year, that could change in the future, either by someone requesting it or because we've like planned out in advance that, these different roles will be changing every so often. It's often a values question of like, if you want to change roles and how often. Sometimes boiling down to like whether or not you want everyone in the cooperative to understand the whole business and at least get a chance to see like how each of the different aspects are working. Or maybe you want for everyone to like build a deep expertise in each area. And so you're not like, planning to shift roles often, if ever. But the roles are the people that are holding the roles are the, how do I say this? Going back to the previous thing, roles are the ones that have authority, not necessarily people. So people are stepping into each of these roles, stepping in and out, and assuming the authority that comes with those. But if someone switches, like let's say from shift lead to server, then as the server, they're not exercising the authority of the shift lead anymore. They're only exercising the authority of the server. So, let's see. I will talk lastly about this section, where there's a bit of, it's talking about how to change structure and move into a circle. And so it could happen on different levels. It doesn't have to be like a big change all at once. It could happen on like the ground floor, and maybe like the folks who are closest to the work are the ones who are like circling up and figuring out how to take the directives, the vision, mission, goals that have been given to them, and doing that democratically. Or it could be that like middle management is also included in that. So like the middle management as well as the people closest are the ones all working democratically. And there are like clarified leaders who are helping to set the vision, mission, etc. At the very top. You can like start cross-linking circles, as is found here, and doing some democratic decision-making between those circles. And it's also possible, to have part of an organization be a circle, where, and the other half operates on more of like a leader hierarchy type structure. I guess what I want to emphasize here is that create what works for you all, and what works best for your members. And as long as everyone agrees to it, you all are operating democratically. And you all can decide to delegate power to like the fundraising director or the human resources director if you choose. Whereas you're like democratically deciding about like research and other things. The pros and cons of a circle and hierarchy structure. Like I guess for the typical like tree hierarchy, it's something that everyone is like familiar with, and that may make it easier to step into. Also, maybe some folks like aren't quite ready to like exhibit their power and operate democratically, and are kind of just like, I guess in this example, in survival mode and just want money at the moment while working at a cool organization, but they can't like contribute to like the increased workload that comes with like democratic decision making. I think one of the pros of democratic decision making is that there's a real intention of having all the voices heard and having all like reasonable and how do I say, objective feedback like integrated into the decisions. And so there's more than likely going to be more folks on board for a decision made in a like democratic circle like sphere, as opposed to the hierarchy type sphere where one person is just telling folks what to do, and then that's kind of that. And so I think some of the cons of the circle structure is that if it's not adequately defined, or folks don't quite know like where the boundaries are for different roles, or how decision-making processes are made, or like maybe even what the objection threshold is, it can make meetings very long, and it can also have people mixing up like personal mission, vision, values with organizational mission, vision, values. And so, yeah, that's why like I harped on the need for clarity in self-directed spaces. Some of the cons for the tree-like hierarchy structure is that it kind of reinforces the dynamics that we're in right now. It can tend to de-empower folks, de-emphasize like voices that like have deep knowledge. It can yeah, I would say those are some of the cons. But really, like when we're walking into any of these structures, yeah, it's good to think about what are the values that our organization wants to hold, and the mission that we're going after, and then think about like what structures help us complete that, like in the now, like short term, as well as like future long term when we create what we're trying to build, or at least get closer and closer to that. The last thing I'll introduce y'all to, oh, you're welcome. The last thing I'll introduce y'all to is this worker self-directed nonprofit manual that's also linked inside of the curriculum. And so it goes through like that circle-based structures I was talking about earlier. It talks about zones of autonomy, how to coordinate between the structures, and talks about like when you do have a general circle, like what that could look like and some of the questions you'll want to think through. As well as a section on roles, talking more like, just kind of reiterating what I was talking about with like how roles work, the structure that roles move through. And then there's also a section for how to transfer roles if that ever comes up. Lastly, there's an exercise in here so that y'all can, yeah, look through a sample job description of an executive director and then see how that can move into a circle. So that's the end for today. I appreciate the questions. Next week, or not next week, tomorrow, we will be doing kind of like a work session. And we'll be doing that for the next couple days. So bring your ideas or your questions about like how this can work for you now with the co-op you're developing, or bring up questions about like, how this applies to the co-op or collective that you're in now, and just getting some more understanding about the decisions that they've chosen for their management structure. All right, so thanks again. We'll see y'all tomorrow on Wednesday. Peace out.
Thanks, Brother Greg. Thank you.